Perfect. Thank you so much, Rachel. So hello, everyone. Welcome back to our 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan Technical Workshop Series. And this is our third meeting together, and I appreciate everyone logging in so quickly and on time today, so thank you. My name is Taylor Laurent, and I'm serving as the 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan's Project Manager. Now, for those who may be new to our technical workshop series, this series of meetings serves as our forum for focused and detailed group discussions on technical components of the 2050 plan. And we have a wide group of workshop participants, as you can see up here on the slide. We have representatives from Orange, Osceola, and Seminole Counties, our 20 cities and towns, Links, the Florida Department of Transportation, Florida's Turnpike Enterprise, Central Florida Expressway Authority, our 3 airports, and the Federal Highway Administration. Today, we will be discussing the ongoing work efforts to develop the MTP, including receiving updates on the Transit Vision Element results, the preview of our freight planning approach for the MTP, and then have a collaborative discussion to refine the indicators or the measures used to evaluate our progress towards achieving the MTP goals and objectives. These topics will be followed by an open discussion, public comments, and then a review of next steps. Now, keeping an eye on our participants list, we do have a great many people signed into the workshop this afternoon. So I do ask that if you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A box, which is located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We will be pausing periodically throughout the presentation to answer any questions that are there in the Q&A box. And if you would prefer to ask your questions aloud, please use the raise your hand button, which is also located at the bottom of your Zoom screen, to let our team know. We will be answering these questions as time permits, either during brief pauses between each of our agenda sections or during our open discussion period at the end of the meeting. So I thank you in advance for your understanding. So without further ado, let's get started with our general status updates. To begin, the public participation plan for the MTP was recently completed and approved by the MetroPlan Orlando board. The final version of this plan will be published on our website fairly soon for you to look over. And then, as a reminder, at our last meeting, we talked about the existing conditions and area profile technical report. That report is already published and available online. The link is included here for quick reference. And we did receive a lot of excellent feedback to curate the 2050 plan's goals and objectives for the future of our transportation system at our last meeting. And we've published those final versions of the goals and objectives in that draft chapter that you saw attached to your agenda packets that was sent out last week. Now, as you were reading through that draft chapter, you likely noticed there were some proposed indicators that were included in there, and those will again be used to measure progress towards achieving those goals and objectives. So without going into too much and spoiling our thunder for later on, we will be revisiting that topic later on in the agenda today. So we'll keep going with our updates. Also, you likely noticed as part of your agenda packet, there was a link to the draft Chapter 8, our Drivers of Change report. We discussed the breadth of trends that could influence the Central Florida's transportation future during our last meeting in April. And with your feedback in mind, we have developed the full report, which provides a more detailed look at each of these items. Now, as a reminder or a refresher, the report focuses on 2 types of trends. The first being how our region is changing on topics such as demographics, economics, and development, and then other external or often global factors that are beyond our control, like technology, climate, and federal and state funding policies. Now, this chapter describes a variety of assumptions and projections for the region's transportation future that will be used to inform policy and investment decision-making between now and 2050. And if you haven't already, I would recommend that you review this document, as it will be directly referenced in upcoming tasks for the MTP's development. Then also underway is our financial resources and revenue forecasting element of the MTP. Now, the MTP is required to be a cost-feasible document, and this task involves the assessment of the financial resources that may be available to fund transportation improvements during our planning period through 2050. This includes evaluating federal, state, local, and private funding sources as potential revenues for transportation improvements. We'll also be looking into innovative funding strategies and other sources like discretionary funds or grant programs that could be used to supplement additional funds into our region. Our team has likely already coordinated with some of you in the effort to identify revenue sources and projections alongside a few of our agency partners. Now, as this overall task work progresses, we will be providing a more detailed presentation and discussion of the 2050 revenue forecasts at our next technical workshop in August. So there will be more to come on this topic. Then continuing on with our technical efforts, we have a few other tasks ongoing at the moment. The first being our continued coordination with FDOT's Central Florida Regional Planning Model Team. We recently submitted comments on the draft socioeconomic data set that they'll be using, and we will be coordinating with FDOT on the proposed revisions to that data set over the coming weeks. Now, two of our other needs assessments were recently completed, the TSMO and Active Transportation Plan, or Active Transportation Needs Assessments, both of which are available online for you to peruse at your earliest convenience. And then a few other works that are ongoing include our Vision Zero action plans, health, housing, and environmental evaluations, all of which are moving forward along schedule. And you will hear more about each of these different elements at future technical workshops. Now, as we are thinking about needs assessment that's top of mind, we do have one that is well underway and getting close to a review period, and that is our state highway system needs assessment. Now, this work, for a little bit of background, began with consolidating the 2045 MTP state highway system needs list and updating it with projects that have been identified or completed over the past several years and have been identified in other recent planning efforts. Our team has also developed 2050 traffic forecast estimations to aid in the identification of any new state highway system needs for our new horizon year of 2050. Now, as we complete the first draft state highway systems needs list, we will be coordinating with each of our local jurisdictions, as well as FDOT, to develop and refine this draft needs list. This will include scheduling a few meetings over the next several weeks to review that content together. These are expected to be in-person meetings with local agency staff and the 2050 MTP team as we work to refine this first draft needs list. And once we've received your feedback and incorporated it, we will be presenting more information about the second draft, the revised version of the state highway system needs list at a future technical workshop. And then the last general update that I have for you today is for the 2050 congestion management process. Now, all MPOs with populations greater than 200,000 are required to develop a congestion management process, and that's the CMP. The CMP uses an objectives-driven, performance-based approach to planning for congestion management, with a focus on managing both recurring and non-recurring congestion. The CMP is a living document that continually evolves to address the results of performance measures, concerns of the community, new objectives and goals of the MPO, and up-to-date information on congestion issues. Now, this year's CMP update will accomplish three primary goals. The first being to refine the performance measures used to evaluate progress, which may consist of updating the approach to defining or collecting data for current metrics. Could involve adding new metrics that are good indicators of how well we are managing congestion in the region also. Then our second goal for the CMP is to update the list of recommended strategies such that they're in alignment with the 2050 MTP goals and will advance the objectives that will be defined in the CMP itself. And finally, this will include the development of a CMP scorecard, which will be developed that provides a snapshot of the overall performance and reliability of the transportation system in Central Florida. One of our staff members, Laura Bauk from MetroPlan Orlando, will be providing a brief progress update on the development of the CMP at our next round of committee and board meetings in the June-July meeting cycle. And there will be an even deeper dive on the elements of the CMP with opportunities to provide input at our August MTP technical workshop. We wanted to provide an update on that for you today so you're ready for the content when it comes to you at our next meeting. Now, I know that's a lot to go over in the first 10 minutes of our meeting, but these ongoing efforts align well with our overall project schedule and the development of the 2050 MTP. So we're steadily moving forward and again on schedule and on track to adopt the 2050 plan in December of 2025. So now that we've quickly reviewed all of the 2050 MTP efforts underway, I will be turning the presentation over to Carl Weckenman to present the Transit Vision Element results. Carl?
Thank you, Taylor. So the Transit Vision Master Plan that we've been working on over the past several months, I just want to highlight that we're pulling together many of the documents that our partners, such as Lynx and Sunrail, have already developed. So the projects that I'm going to be discussing are not new, but what we have done is updated costs and created a prioritization, which we'll show you later in the presentation. Next. And you can go to the next. So to begin our process, we were asked to do a peer review, and so we picked out 7 other regions in the country, regions that are in the Sun Belt, growth regions with lower population densities, which is impactful to transit, and similar development patterns. Next. So as we reviewed comparing Orlando and Central Florida to the other regions, what we find is that in terms of transit usage, transit ridership per capita, we are fairly in line with many of the other regions throughout the nation. And next. And then also looking at transit expenditure. So this is really looking at the public investment in transit based on a per capita basis. As you can see, Orlando is closely in line with other regions in this category as well. Las Vegas was a clear outlier in both, but compared to most of these other regions, we're very close. Next. Our team developed a transit propensity index to look at the locations in the region in which transit and demographics within the population are most amenable to public transportation usage. And so we develop a model based on actual usage of public transportation within the region, and then apply it to different geographical areas. Perhaps not surprisingly, we find that the highest transit propensity in the area is west of downtown Orlando in the Pine Hills area and areas stretching farther south. But there are other pockets of elevated demand as well, such as the 436 corridor east of Orlando, in the Sanford area and Apopka areas. Next. And then to the south in areas such as Kissimmee and Buena Vista Lakes in Osceola County. Next. So most of the balance of the presentation will be going through the projects and their associated costs. And we'll start with some of the capital projects. So to begin, looking at improvements to the rail system. So we currently have a 50-mile long north-south Sunrail between Poinciana and DeBary, but looking at opportunities to expand that system to other areas, such as the airport and the Sunshine Corridor to the Orange County Convention Center and Disney, with some other locations here as well. One note is the Polk County extension is an extension that's here for illustrative purposes only. This isn't included in our cost estimates as it's serving primarily areas outside of the 3-county region. Next. So these are the total of the capital costs estimates for these various rail projects. So the key here is the total capital cost is $2.3 billion. Of note is that there are federal grant monies that can be applied here, but generally they do come with a fairly substantial local share. So this is going to require a local investment of a pretty substantial amount for most of these projects to get off the ground. Next. Also looking at operating improvements on the existing line. And here that would be increasing the peak frequency to 15 minutes, and then improving service on off-peak periods, including adding weekend service. To do all of that would more than double the revenue hours that are currently provided by Sunrail and nearly double the operations and maintenance costs. Next. In addition to added costs along the north-south line, there would also be obvious annual O&M costs associated with other extensions, whether that be service to OIA, the Sunshine Corridor, or the Orange Blossom Express. And so we used operating assumptions that were found in plans for these lines, the most recent plans, and created operations and maintenance costs based on that. Next, please. In addition to rail service, another key element is significantly improved bus service. Bus rapid transit, which is a service that would include transit-only lanes, queue jumps, transit signal priority, and other elements to speed bus service to be somewhat more like rail. We've identified a number of corridors in the region, corridors in which there's already existing strong transit ridership, and key corridors to create a framework of an improved transit system. The total capital cost for these in aggregate is $1.6 billion. Next. In addition to those several corridors, there are other key transit corridors that have been identified in plans from links that would enhance the customer's experience, but not quite to the extent of adding bus-only lanes or queue jumps. And these we've called enhanced bus corridors. So not quite the level of investment. There's 5 of these totaling $116 million. Next. And as you'll see later in the slide, looking at improving bus service generally throughout the region will require substantially new transit facilities in terms of transferring locations, transit centers, and a few new park and ride facilities. So 20 new locations have been identified, 10 locations in which we need to expand the existing transit centers simply to accommodate an increase in bus service at those locations, and then 3 new park and ride facilities throughout the region. The total of all of those is $201 million. There are improvements that would be needed to existing rail stations that are included in the earlier amount for a rail system. Next. So along with the capital improvements, the bus service improvements, which would largely increase the operations and maintenance costs of transit, are also considered. And so next. And the key element to Lynx's future plans is the development of a high frequency transit network. So currently, I believe Lynx operates a single route at a frequency of 15 minutes or better outside of its downtown limo service. And this, so the vision here is to substantially increase that amount of service so that it's able to touch numerous other areas within the community. In all 3 of the counties, you can see 28 total routes, and each of the counties having a representative amount of service. And as you can see in the map, creating a substantial amount of coverage throughout the region. Next, please. On top of that, improvements to the existing bus network. And so this would be looking for efficiencies where bus service currently perhaps is inefficient, but also making key improvements and added routes in some new locations as appropriate as well. So this is a little bit more of the standard bus service, but designed to increase the footprint and the catchment area of that frequent service. Next, please. And then finally, on-demand service, which could be neighbor link, but it also could be other approaches, such as mobility on demand, more of an Uber Lyft type approach, but some sorts of flexible service that operates in zones is what's envisioned here. So many of these zones are somewhat on the periphery, but there are some infill areas where that type of service would make most sense to reach into communities. Next. And then finally, a regional express system to connect customers over longer distances, in some cases to downtown Orlando, and others to locations such as the University of Central Florida, or the attractions in the southwest part of Orange County. Next. So a quick comparison on existing links bus services and this 25-year needs plan of what we've just looked at in the prior slides. You can see would increase the annual operating costs in 2024 dollars by over $200 million annually, and increase the number of routes by nearly 50 and nearly double the number of buses needed. Next. So over the next few slides, we'll look at all of those elements and then putting them into baskets of short, medium, and long range, essentially a prioritization of projects. Next. So in the short-term vision, calls for 3 BRT and enhanced bus corridors to be implemented, 16 new and improved transit centers, so creating some of the bones to allow the service improvements, and then a number of improvements. About half of the high frequency routes would be implemented in the short term, and then other improvements as well. Next. Adding to that to the midterm, we're now able to do some of the rail service, including the Sunrail extension to OIA and the Sunshine Corridor, and double tracking gaps in the existing main line. 2 more BRT and another enhanced bus service. Most of the additional bus transit service that was shown earlier, including 9 more high frequency routes. And then you can see several other services as well. Next. And then finally, with the long-term transit vision, most of the bus network would be in at this point, but some of the longer term items, such as Sunrail extension to Apopka along the Orange Blossom Express, and a new Sunrail station at Edgewood. Next slide. A few additional BRT corridors, and the final numbers of transit centers and high frequency routes as well. And so because those maps were quite busy, I'll run through these fairly quickly, but this is essentially breaking it down throughout the region so that you can see how some of these elements come together. This is the short-term vision for Seminole and Northern Orange County. Next. Adding in those elements that are included in the midterm vision. So you can see a growing footprint of the transit network. Next. And then finally, long-term transit vision, including rail service to Apopka and Zellwood. Next. To the east, a key element of the short-term vision is high-frequency service along 436. Next. Which would then become a BRT service. By the time you get to a midterm vision, at the point of a midterm vision, we also would have Sunrail service to the airport and implementation of the Sunshine Corridor. Next. And then finally, some of the other routes come to fruition going from short to long, or from the medium to the long term. Next. On the western Orange County, key elements of the short-term vision are the north-south BRTs on Kirkman and US 441 to the south. Next. Several new MOD or neighbor link zones, along with new transit routes in the midterm vision. Next. And then finally, some additional MOD zones and other transit routes in the 2035 to 2049 timeframe. In the south, the continuation of the 441 service to Kissimmee is part of the short-term vision, along with high-frequency service from Kissimmee to St. Cloud. Next. The high-frequency service is then extended west to the attractions from Kissimmee, along with additional services throughout the area in the midterm vision. And then next. And then finally, BRT service linking St. Cloud with the attractions along US 192 in the long-term vision. Next. So with a bold vision and with a lot of costs that are not currently part of the budget, did look at transit funding. Next. And so currently on the link side, in terms of the capital sources of funds, most of those tend to be federal dollars and state dollars, with the local governments matching only a small fraction. And this is for 2023, in which there was still COVID-19 additional funds that were still being utilized. So that probably accounts for somewhat why federal shares were such a large amount of the capital. But I do want to also note that for the operating fund sources, the fare box generates anywhere from 10 to 15%. And then there are some ancillary revenues as well, but most of this is a subsidized service. And most of that subsidy comes from the local governments. And so as we look at bus service that is $200 million more in an annual O&M compared to the current as a vision, it also means that that only can become reality if there's new local sources identified. Next. Sunrail, this is for their past budget year, but obviously much of what is state investment now will be moving over to local commitments into the future as well. But this is a snapshot of where the sources of revenue they had for 2023. And they use a little bit more of their federal money for preventive maintenance, which explains why they have a larger share of federal money for operating. But the same applies. Generally, the operating sources there's only so much the federal government is, there's only so many grant programs that the federal government will pay for, and even on the capital side, especially with large investments, um, it's a need for the local governments to show some skin in the game. Next slide. And this is just finally potential funding sources that are not currently tapped, that can be tapped for both federal and state sources. Probably the most significant is the New Starts program that can pay for things like rail start programs and the BRT capital improvements. Generally, those come with the requirement to match them with 50% of local money. And this, fortunately, the state of Florida does provide about half the match. That's generally been their policy over time. But that still creates a burden of at least a quarter of those projects coming from local sources. And I believe that is the final slide. Next steps. So we have completed a draft report that describes what was in this presentation and quite a bit more that we've provided to MetroPlan. We anticipate that being finalized here by the end of June. And then as the MTP moves forward, the projects within this presentation and within this plan will move into the transit vision element of the 2050 MTP. And with that, I'm not sure if we're going to do questions or how we're doing on time, but that's the conclusion of my presentation.
Thank you so much, Carl. So as a reminder, if anyone does have any questions, please use the raise your hand feature or type your questions into the Q&A box. I did see one question come in the Q&A box, and I'll answer that one first. It was, how can I get a copy of this presentation? I want to look a little bit more at the slides. So kind of per our usual process, after this meeting, we will be sending out an email with a direct link to be able to view a PDF version of this presentation on our website. So that will be included and sent out to everyone who attended today. And I see there's one more question. Joshua DeVries, you're recognized.
Thank you. Well, first of all, Carl, I think that's a really bold vision. I'd be great if we were able to achieve that. Are you able to flip back to the slide of the ultimate configuration, or what you're calling that? That showed the all of the flex the routes, and yeah, that right there. So with this plan, was there? I'm just wondering, like, what the if there's been local coordination, because as you showed on the other slide, the 68% local funding. Have there been preliminary discussions with the local funding partners on this plan, as far as potentially starting to plan for the increase in needed funds and potentially increase in additional funding partners, or is this kind of the initial beginning of that?
Well, as I would note from the beginning of my presentation, the projects that are included here, for example, in the case of Osceola County, were those same ones that were included in, I think it was completed in 2021, the Osceola County Transit Vision Plan. So the coordination I guess I would point to is what has been done previously, because we are just compiling the projects at this point for the MTP. But in answer to your question, yes, I think how this gets funded and to what extent we're able to implement this vision is certainly sort of the ongoing phase of coordination with local partners for sure.
Okay. Yeah, and even the interim, like the early step, I saw some new on-demand flex like over in the St. Cloud area, which I could certainly see a need for that, but given that they're not currently a funding partner, we definitely want to take into consideration the financial impacts of that, so we can look at how Osceola County as a funding partner could plan for that implementation of that vision.
Sure.
So yeah, I definitely would look forward to that link, and I'll begin the conversations from my end, anyways, from Transportation Transit and Osceola, and filter it up so that those discussions can at least begin, anyways. And I like I said at the beginning of my statement, I think this is a really bold vision. I'd love to see the additional transit and different transportation options, more options we have. In theory, less cars on the road. So that I'd love to see that. Just want to make sure we're taking into consideration the funding obligations that go along with that. And actually now I'm noticing a big chunk of Poinciana area and Polk County as well.
Absolutely.
So do you know if Lynx has had coordination with Polk on that as a potential funding partner for that as well? I know this is MTP, so I mean that this may be way too early for that question, but
I'd imagine it would be. I don't know if they have, so I can't speak for Lynx.
Okay, all right. Well, I really appreciate the presentation, and that's all I had. I'll once I get that link, I'll filter it up, and I appreciate the information.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. And we did have two other quick questions in chat. The first being, how do I get my city added to the on-demand or FlexBus areas? So those are, Carl, correct me if I'm wrong, those are the NeighborLink service areas through Lynx.
Yes.
So that would be a discussion with Lynx to be able to get a new area added. And then one more, will this data be broken down into a cost feasible data set? Yes, that is our next step. So this is kind of the long-term vision, non-cost restrictive. Moving forward, as we get into cost feasibility discussions and funding discussions later on through the development of the MTP, likely 6 to 8 months from now, that's when we'll be kind of bringing in the financial aspect and discussion to all of our needs assessments together. And we do need to keep moving in terms of time, so if anyone does have any other questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat or the Q&A box, and we'll be able to revisit them in our open discussion period towards the end of the meeting. Thank you. So thank you so much, Carl, for that overview of our transit vision element and the results that are forthcoming. I really appreciate that. The next item on our agenda is a preview of the freight planning approach by Haitao Yu. Haitao, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Taylor. Good afternoon, everyone. Today, I'll be presenting the freight needs assessment. But before diving into the presentation, I'd like to give you a quick overview of my presentation today. I'm going to start with why we do this, why freight planning, and then I will present some of our early findings from the ongoing work. And then after that, I will introduce some other ongoing tasks. Next slide, please. I want to kick off today's presentation by highlighting why freight planning. So MetroPlan Orlando's vision is to create a regional transportation system network that support safe and efficient movements of people and goods to support regional vitality. Freight planning is a critical component to support the vision. Freight planning informs decision-making. So by identifying needs and challenges and opportunities for future improvements, those information is very important to guide us to develop effective and long-term planning solutions. The issue that we face in freight planning are diverse. Those issues include infrastructure challenges, operational challenges, and also institutional ones. For example, our roadway might require updates to handle more freight activities, or we might need to optimize signal timing to reduce truck congestions. There are also institutional barriers, such as regulatory constraints and the coordination barriers among different stakeholders or between agencies. And we need to identify those issues and develop freight strategies. So that leads to why freight planning. That leads to the question at the beginning of the presentation, why freight planning? By effective freight planning, we can ensure our transportation system is efficient and safe to support our region's economic vitality, and also provide business with reliable freight network that they need to thrive. Next slide, please. So I'm gonna talk about the assessment approach that we're currently working on, and the purpose of the freight assessments is to analyze the current and the future freight needs, identify critical freight infrastructure gaps, and then develop freight strategies. We have developed an evaluation framework as a roadmap to achieve those goals. The first one is the state of the practice and literature review data review. I would say this is the very first step that we will lay out the foundation for the following tasks. We will review freight plans, programs, studies at different levels, and we will also be reviewing freight trending topics in the industry so that we can identify emerging freight trends in the industry, and we can get, position ourselves and get prepared for the changing freight dynamics. The second task is the freight-focused existing condition analysis. We will leverage the data that we have and evaluate the current freight conditions through a multimodal freight perspective. The following task, I will touch on this in next couple slides. It is the identifying key freight corridors and subsystem. We will develop a regional freight network, identify key roadways that support a regional freight network, freight movement. The following task is the freight industry outreach and engagement. Through this task, we hope that we can enhance the communication and collaborations among different stakeholders, including the freight industry and also public agencies. This will be a excellent, great opportunity for us to talk to the freight system users and gather information so that those information can inform our work. The last step is to document the needs and planning strategies. We will document what we have evaluated and identified, and based on those, we will identify potential planning strategies for the future freight planning. So all the freight findings of our work will be incorporated into the 2050 MTP's system needs assessment to inform the project development. Next slide, please. So I have to talk about the background of this task. So I'd like to present some of early findings from the emerging trends review. So just give you a quick recap of this task is we want to review all the trending freight topics in the industry so that we can position ourselves and for the future freight. So we look at two types of trends. The first one, the internal ones, how the region itself is evolving. And we also look at the external ones, such as technologies or other external factors that could affect the freight. The first one is the drivers of change, which is the economic growth. So we all know that the Central Florida region has experienced significant economic growth in the recent years, such as population migration, tourism increase, and also manufacturing increase. So all of this will bring significant needs to freight demand in the region in the future. The second one is the market shifts. So how the market shift could affect freight. There are many topics under this category. So the first one is the domestic sourcing and multi-shoring. Those concepts refer to the companies that they restructure their supply chain and they start to obtain the goods, materials, service from local suppliers rather than international suppliers, so that they can reduce the supply chain risks and also support the local economy. And also during our review, we found that there's a trade routes are being realigned from West Coast to East Coast because of the the geopolitical conflicts and also some seaport capacity issue on the West Coast. So to help you contextualize all this concept, if you can see the chart on the right side of the screen, on the upper right, you will see the total seaport tonnage change for all Florida seaports. It's pretty clear that in 2022, when the COVID-19 pandemic hit the global supply chain, there's a significant drop in terms of total tonnage. And then as the economies reopen, you will see there was a steep increase in terms of the seaport tonnage, and it is forecasted to continue to grow in future. And also we analyzed the commodity flow data from the Federal Highway Administration that we found that in the MetroPlan Orlando planning area, the 3-county area, there will be approximately 69% in terms of tonnage for the commodity flow in future between 2022 to 2050. And by value, the percentage increase will be 117%. So all of these factors we as we review that we are pretty sure that this will increase the needs for freight system in the region. Next slide, please. Another big topic is the supply chain. Supply chain is refers to the concept of all the linkages among suppliers, manufacturers, retailers, and distributors to deliver their goods and services to the consumers. And freight is a critical component to support the supply chain operations. And Central Florida is home to many well-known companies and manufacturers, so healthy supply chain operation is critical to support the regional economy. One of the hot topic for the supply chain is the supply chain disruption and resilience. The supply chain disruption can be caused by manufacturers such as geopolitical conflicts or cyber attacks, or extreme weathers like hurricanes in Florida or tornadoes. Those all factors can cause the supply chain disruption and then have significant economic impacts. I want to share with you about 2 sets of statistics on the right side of the screen. There's a report, global supply chain report, which suggests that on average, the global company, they're having approximately $182 million on average revenue loss due to supply chain disruptions. And about 72% of all the organizations and companies that they have experienced the supply chain disruptions in the past couple of years. And also in Florida, due to the Hurricane Idalia last year, a UF report suggests that about $80 million or to $370 million what caused by the Hurricane Idalia last year for the agricultural production. So that leads the question that why supply chain resilience planning is important for freight. Resilience planning can help us to anticipate, prevent, and also recover from supply chain disruptions to ensure the continuity of the supply chain operation. So during the review, we have observed that a lot of MPOs and DOT peers, they are implementing a variety of resilience strategies, such as resilience monitoring, mitigation plans, also investment in resilient transportation infrastructure. And also there are initiatives, to promote sustainable freight infrastructure to reduce environment impact. Next slide, please. So the last topic is the technology transformation. The new technologies, they are reshaping all modes of transportation, including freight. This is a huge topic, so we selected some topics that that are relevant to freight planning in the Central Florida region. The first one is the truck parking. You probably will notice that sometimes truck drivers, they park their trucks along the highway corridor, highway shoulders, or along the ramps. That's because they cannot find a truck parking space. And as we review this topic, we found that there's a nationwide shortage of the truck parking, and also there are regulatory requirements that requires truck drivers to take some rest after a certain period of driving for safety purposes. So as we review the topic, we found that FDOT or other DOTs, or including a lot of private companies, they are implementing new technologies such as truck parking monitoring system, or they also have the smartphone apps to help you to find a truck parking spot. As I just mentioned, the efforts are being made to solve this issue, but it will remain a challenge in the near future. The next is the electrification. The electrification of freight. So there are a lot of national policies and programs, initiatives that are driving this shift. I want to share with you that in 2024, the Federal Highway Administration, they are proposing the concept of the freight EV corridor, which is based on the National Highway Freight Network, to promote the transition of the electrification of freight vehicles. The map on the right side of the screen shows the proposed network, the freight EV corridor network. This is probably not the best map to show Central Florida, but in Central Florida we have I-4 Turnpike and State Road 528 as part of the national freight EV corridors. And the last topic is the automation, the artificial intelligence, and which I know everyone's talking about this topics these days. And there are significant advancement in the automation and artificial intelligence technology. That those will for sure will lead to a new, will have effects on freight, on the freight planning. Those technologies can improve the safety of driving, reduce the freight operation costs, and therefore improve the efficiency of the freight movement. So I think that's the end of the emerging trends review. And so in summary, all of these trends are highly relevant to, sorry, Taylor, can you? So all of the trends are highly relevant to freight planning in the Central Florida region. And we hope that by this exercise, we can, understand these trends, and so that we can get prepared for ourselves for the changing freight land dynamics. Next slide, please. So I also want to present you some of the existing condition analysis results that in the region that we have completed recently. The goal of the existing condition analysis to develop regional freight profiles, and so that they can serve as a baseline for us to identify freight, challenges, bottlenecks, or areas that requires improvements. I want to make a note here that freight is not just about moving goods from point A to point B. It's a multimodal system which integrates all modes of freight. So we will be looking at the freight system from a multimodal system perspective. We'll be looking at the roadways, highways, railway, airports, seaport space, and truck parking facilities. And we'll be also investigating other, other topics of freight, such as truck safety, crashes, commodity flows, and also freight land uses. Next slide, please. So I want to present you some of the early results from the existing condition analysis. The first map is the free land use by building floor area. So you will probably notice that there are some big clusters near the west of downtown and also southwest of the airport. Those are the highway free land use area. So this information can help us to identify or capture where the major freight traffic generators are. The map in the center of the screen is the truck crash hotspot. So we analyzed the FDOT crash database, and we focused on the commercial vehicles. This map will help us to identify where truck safety issues exist, or where the truck crashes are mostly likely to happen. The last map is the freight tonnage, which is from the FHWA's commodity flow data. So the thicker line means the roadway with that carries most of freight commodities by tonnage. It's pretty obvious that it's pretty clear that Turnpike, 528 and I-4, those are the roadways that support the regional freight movement. And by understanding all of these maps, we hope that we can identify freight bottlenecks or areas that requires improvement, and also identify opportunities for the future improvements. Next slide, please. So I'd like to also introduce you with an ongoing industry outreach effort. We realized that well-executed technical evaluation must be supported by the voice of the freight industry. So we hope that through this outreach events, we can learn from the freight industry, and we hope that those could be a unique opportunity for us to interact and collaborate with all the freight stakeholders, so that we can work together and identify and develop strategies to address the freight needs in the region. There will be 2 roundabout events. The first one will be in mid-July. The topic for the first one will be capturing the industry input. So we will present our findings, and then we will have some interactive sessions and work together to identify the freight bottlenecks in the region. We will ask questions such as how the freight system is being used, where it worked well, and where it needs improvements. So all of this information that we'll be collecting from the first one will fit into the freight needs assessments of the later work. The second one will be in August 2024. So the topic for the second one will be a validation of the findings and the strategies. So we will communicate with the group that what we have achieved so far. Ask questions like, such as, did we do it right, or did we miss anything? So I want to take advantage of this presentation and then make an announcement that if you feel like someone might be interested or should be participating in this events, feel free to connect. Let us know that we are happy to connect. Next slide, please. Okay. I think that this is my last presentation. So we will in terms of next steps, we will engage with the industry stakeholders. And then I also want to touch on identifying the key fleet infrastructure tasks. So this is ongoing work that we will leverage all the work that we have done, all the data that we have, and then develop a regional freight network, roadway network. So this network will serve as a baseline to get planners for their investment decision making. And in the coming month, we will compile everything and evaluate the needs, solutions, and develop some strategies as part of the 2050 MTP update. I think that's enough of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Haitao. And we're starting to run a little bit low on time for the meeting today. So we are going to ask that if you have any questions for Haitao about the freight element and the approach to the work that is ongoing or going to be occurring in the next few months, please put those questions in the chat or the Q&A box. And if we have time remaining at the end of the meeting, we'll revisit those during our open discussion period. So I'll turn it over to John Kaliski and Danny Schopf, who will lead us through our discussion of the goals, objectives, and indicators, which we'll refine today, and also go through an activity, I believe, right?
That's right. Thank you, Taylor, and good afternoon, everybody. John Kaliski with Cambridge Systematics. We were with you at the last workshop talking about goals and objectives, and as Taylor indicated, the updated list of goals and objectives has been shared with all of you prior to this meeting. So I want to give you just a very quick update on the changes on those, and then we'll reserve most of the time to talk about indicators, and we have an exercise that will engage you in to look at a lot of them very quickly. If you could advance to the next slide, Taylor. Just wanted to recap some of the definitions that we've been using, and they're in the chapter that's been shared with you. But a goal is a very broad statement about our desired end state. The objective is a measurable statement to support a goal. An indicator, which we'll be spending our time on today, are data used to measure progress towards the goals and objectives. And then the strategy is sort of the how do we get it done? And actually, I do want to thank many of you, I know, participated in the survey on the draft goals and objectives. We got a lot of excellent feedback, and probably the two most frequent comments were, how are we going to measure it, which gets to the indicators, and how are we going to actually accomplish that, which gets to the strategy. So those are the things that are coming next. In April, we talked about the goals framework and the draft goals and objectives. Today, we'll briefly touch on the revised and then start the conversation on indicators, and then at future meetings, update you on the final list of indicators and get into discussion of strategies. Next slide, just as a quick recap, there's 5 proposed goals for the 2050 MTP. They're very similar to the 5 in the 2045, but some different language, and all of them are down to one-word titles as shown here. The other way we're showing the goals is on the next slide, and just trying to indicate the interrelationships between all of them. That the ultimate vision is a transportation system that supports a thriving Central Florida region. All of these goals get us there. They're really not in silos, they're interconnected. So, better connectivity for transit also supports access to jobs, which supports prosperity. Better access to housing improves the quality of life in our communities. It also reduces costs and supports prosperity. So trying to look at the interconnections between all of these goals and how they function as a set. The next slide, I will just kind of very quickly recap where we've landed on the goals and objectives. Safety, and again, as mentioned in the chapter, these are not listed in a priority order, but obviously safety is a very important issue. We're taking a very broad definition of safety, so it's not just looking at fatalities and serious injuries on the system, but it's also looking at is the system able to function well during emergencies, and are we protecting people from any kind of risk or harm that could occur via the transportation system as we look into things like security breaches or human trafficking and so forth. The big change here was actually, as suggested at our last workshop, using language like deaths and serious injuries and just trying to humanize the safety objectives a little bit more. The second goal is reliability, again, taking a very broad view of what we mean by reliability. So it's our commitment that the system should be in a state of good repair for all users, that the travel time should be reliable for all modes, and that the system should be adapting over time to customer needs and preferences. So a disabled person, for example, has a different expectation about reliability, and we want to be able to meet that expectation as well. Connectivity, this is one where the goal statement was revised. There was a lot of questions about clarity and what was meant by it. So it's really focusing on how do we enhance lives through improved access to jobs and services, and that could include healthcare, education, access to food, and so forth for people of all ages and abilities, so that the system really meeting the needs of the customers. There's an objective related to how the public transportation system functions, and of course, we just saw a great presentation on the thinking on that. An objective about the active transportation system also being connected and providing the right access. And then sort of the third objective is revised since we last met, and it's really looking at different view of connectivity, that the region becomes more connected as we reduce our trip distance per capita. So whether that's a more complete grid network or more complete transit systems, or just other ways, better balance of jobs and housing, so that people are traveling less and are more connected to the resources that they need. The fourth goal is community. Again, this one we reworded the goal statement based on feedback at the workshop. So really focusing on health and vitality. And it's written in a plural sense because this is a diverse region. So there's multiple communities, multiple built-in natural environments in this region. That's part of what makes this region so special. And so being able to preserve, protect, enhance all of those communities and environments. A couple of very specific objectives related to improving public health, reducing the adverse health impacts associated with inactivity, also reducing pollutants and emissions, and then a general objective about enhancing the natural and built environments. And then the final goal gets to prosperity, and it's about strengthening our region's economy, having investments and strategies that enhance economic prosperity, grow our trade activity, our visitor activity, and so forth. Better access to jobs, which of course relates to the objective we just saw in community, but particularly here calling out the essential service workers, and then increasing the region's affordability as a place to live, work, and visit. So I know I ran through that quickly. We can get into any questions as we move along. I want to just kind of turn now to indicators, and that's the next step in this process. And an indicator is really what's measurable, what's helping us understand the trends, how the system is changing over time. Some of the indicators that you saw in the memo that went out to you that we'll talk about today are specific federally required performance measures, things like bridge and pavement condition. Others are things that we may end up by the end of this process determining would be a good performance measure for MetroPlan Orlando to officially adopt and set a target. Some of these will become the basis for prioritization criteria as we move forward. Some may just be more general indicators that we just want to track so we can look at the trends and conditions and understand what's happening in the region. An indicator, for example, on housing, availability of affordable housing, not something that transportation alone can solve, but certainly an important indicator to understand the context for making transportation decisions. So what makes a good indicator? We're looking for things that are measurable, that are specific, updated on a regular basis. So some great things in the census every 10 years, but probably not the indicators that we want. Things that are understandable to the public. And there's a long list that you've seen. Some of them, ultimately, we may end up deciding fit better in the tracking the trends document and the congestion management process. But right now, we really just want to get your sense on how do we measure progress on all of these goals and objectives, and what are some of the important data to start collecting and tracking over time. So I'm going to turn over to my colleague, Danny Shop, who's going to walk us through an interactive exercise to get your thoughts on all of these, hopefully in the next 19 minutes.
Thanks, John. So for those of you that have logged into the link that Taylor provided, this is what you're seeing, or something approximating that. But if you jump to the next slide, Taylor, we can talk about what we actually need to do while we're in here. I'll start by saying I recommend doing this on a laptop. You get better functionality using the laptop, but if you are on mobile, we can definitely make that work. So there's a QR code on this this slide. There's also a link at the bottom. And like I said, there's a link in the chat that you can use to access that. It looks like we've got a handful in there already, which is a good start. Each of these goals has a list of indicators included with it. And really what we're looking for today is a quick reaction from you all about what you think of these indicators. Take a look. Let me know. Do you think it's perfect as it's written? Do you think you're comfortable with this as written, but you would have done it a little differently maybe? Maybe you're unsure about it. We need to have some more conversation about how we convey this, or if this is really relevant. And then maybe, hopefully not very many of these are just not hitting the mark at all, and we have to have some serious thought and go back to the drawing board on those. Each of those we can do with a pretty simple reaction, which I'll show you how to do right now. So I'll pause. It looks like we've got a handful of you on, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you all can see what we're doing here real time. So just a very quick tutorial on what we're going to do for each of these sections. Each of these should only take a minute or two. We'll go pretty quickly. But each of these sticky notes on the board is showing several of all of the indicators that we've identified. What I need you all to do is to click this little happy face up here so you can get your list of emojis, and then tell us how you feel about them. You may not see these up at the top for you. You may have to search for them by heart or thumb, if I can spell it. Question mark. Whoops. Let's undo that. Question mark, to get the reactions you're looking for. By doing that, you can add those to each of these sticky notes. Once we start to see some of those show up, we should be able to start having some conversations about how you all feel about this. Don't be shy. I'll take a thumbs up reaction. I'll take some heart reactions. This is all good stuff. We appreciate it. Yeah, try not to delete those. I appreciate that.
And anyone else who's still wanting to participate, the direct link to this is included in the chat. So you're able to click there to be able to join and participate.
If you're having trouble with the board getting it to work, feel free to just drop your comments in the chat as well. We'll capture them that way.
So far, it looks like we're getting some pretty good energy on the first three. We love to hear that.
If you have a question on any of these, what they mean, just feel free to drop that in the chat as well. We may not be able to get through all of them by 3:30, but we'll certainly keep that record for as we go into the revision of all of this.
All right. I don't see any major concerns or confusion. John, did you have anything else you wanted to cover related to this one, or should we shuffle along?
No, it looks like we got some good feedback. And as you can see, there's a lot of detail that's in the technical memo on how some of these will be measured, what do we mean by road user type and so forth. But thank you for the quick feedback on these.
All right. Next up, let's slide along to reliability. If you all right click and drag, it'll shuffle you over to the next one. Uh-oh. There we go.
And there are a lot of measures here, but as you mentioned in the presentation, we're defining reliability broadly. So capturing a lot of the asset condition measures, most of which are federally required, and then a lot of the measures around travel time reliability for the different modes.
All right, still positive reactions rolling in. This is all good stuff.
Right. And yeah, there seems to be a lot of positive feedback.
Yeah, I think we're pretty good here. All right, let's shuffle right along. Let's hit some connectivity. Let's see what everybody has to say about that.
All right.
Again, if you right click and drag your screen, you will find connectivity. As a reminder, we'll be able to go back to this after the meeting. We'll be able to pull all of these responses. So if we do move ahead before you've had a chance to finish reviewing, feel free to stick around and add some reactions to each of those, and we can certainly go back and check those out after the meeting. All right, more positive reactions. This is all good stuff. I appreciate it, everyone. Taylor and John, my apologies. I'm not looking at the chat at the moment. Is there anything in the chat or the Q&A that we need to be addressing before we move on to the next one?
Not at the moment.
Okay.
I think we've got a couple concerns expressed on some of these, but if we have a moment or two at the end, we can take some general discussion on a couple.
Yeah, we'll save any discussion for some of those right after we finish all 5.
Okay. So then let's shift down to community. We are almost through all of them, and then we can run back through and address some of the ones that may have had some concerns.
Yeah.
And for those of you that did your homework, if you'd like to work ahead, that's okay too.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And some of these, of course, are a little bit different. These aren't things that have typically been measured by a lot of transportation agencies. So some places where some new thinking may be necessary, but we focused on items that we knew could be measurable today. There may be some ultimate measures on some of these that might evolve in the future.
All right, I'll pause here for just another minute and then we'll shift to the last one. Got a lot of positive reaction on this rates of asthma, obesity, and diabetes. All right, let's hit our final goal, and then we can come back through and talk about some that you all may have had concerns with.
And I do see we have a hand raised. We'll be able to recognize you, Catherine, as soon as we finish getting our feedback here on this item, then we'll be able to go through your question.
All right, John, do you want to shift back all the way to safety and see if we can identify any we have concerns with, or was there a specific goal you think had more concerns than others that we should start with?
I think we've just got a couple minutes, so maybe we should go with Catherine's hand first, since she had raised already, and then we'll see how much time we have left.
Sure thing.
And I just saw in the chat, Catherine said, no question, she's good.
Oh, all right, excellent.
So it looks like it was a little bit of excitement
all right,
about
excellent.
the indicators, so we'll take that.
All right, so maybe yeah, we just have a couple moments. So I would probably just say if anyone who had a something that you marked down as a question mark or a thumbs down, if you wanted to speak to it, maybe just raise your hand or put a quick comment in the chat about your concern on that indicator. And then the other general question I might ask the group is, was there anything major missing, something you were hoping might be on the list that didn't show up?
Not seeing anything come through in the Q&A or the chat. So I think that's some positive reinforcement.
Right.
But if anyone does go through and read the technical report that was transmitted as part of your agenda packets, kind of after this meeting, there will be additional opportunities to provide feedback on the draft indicators through the upcoming advisory committee meetings here at MetroPlan Orlando. And you're always welcome to reach out to myself and the rest of our team to be able to share your thoughts and ask any questions that you have about the MTP.
Yeah. Right, and we can, Danny, we can leave this board open for a little while for anybody who wants to spend more time on it.
Absolutely.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. So we appreciate all of your hard work and just to get that instantaneous feedback from so many people. So just a quick what's happening next. We'll make some tweaks based on today's feedback. This will go through the advisory committees and board over the next few weeks, and then we'll complete the chapter. But more importantly, all that information is already being used for the other tasks, but we'll have sort of the official list as input for the rest of the MTP process. So thank you. And Taylor, back to you.
All right, thank you so much. We do have 5 minutes left. So were there any immediate kind of questions that we wanted to address today, or are there any questions in the chat pod that came through that that you would prefer that we contact you about after the meeting if you want to have a more detailed discussion? Either way, please indicate your preference in the chat pod or the Q&A pod, and we'll make sure to follow up with you accordingly. So I'm not seeing anything come through immediately. And for those of you who did have more detailed questions about the transit vision element results, Sarah Larson from MetroPlan Orlando did share both her and Carl's contact information so we can have more detailed discussions about that particular element of the MTP. And again, more information will come about all of these different pieces as the MTP progresses, and the cost feasibility and financial revenue discussions will be coming within the next several months. And not seeing any other hands raised at the moment. I will ask Mary Ann, do we have any hands raised for a public comment?
No, Taylor, I don't see any hands raised on the participant side.
Okay, thank you. So we'll circle back to that just in case the hand is raised here in the next few moments. But to wrap up today's meeting, I just wanted to summarize a few of those next steps and action items that were kind of mentioned briefly throughout the presentation, but bring it all back into one spot for quick and easy reference when you receive the slides after this meeting. So first, we mentioned that draft Drivers of Change report. If you would like to review that and provide any feedback or comments, please do so by contacting us with those comments by June 28th, towards the end of the month. so we can incorporate your feedback into the final version. Thank you for your active participation in providing your thoughts on the draft indicators today. We will take that back in and revisit that as a team, make revisions as necessary. And we will also have an additional opportunity to provide feedback on those draft indicators during these upcoming June and July advisory committee meetings here at MetroPlan Orlando. So there will still be opportunities to provide your feedback there. After that point, we'll take in all of the feedback we've received from all these different avenues and use that to incorporate, finalize those indicators and incorporate them into the 2050 MTP and move forward with all of those. And then for our local agencies, please keep an eye on your email. You will be getting a message from me to start proactively scheduling those state highway system needs assessment coordination meetings. So with that, one final reminder, we will have 3 more technical workshops this year, the next being in April, the one after that in October, and then the last one in December. So you will be receiving calendar holds for those over the next several days to make sure that as the very busy fall season approaches, that we have our time set aside so we can have our technical workshop discussions and help move forward with the 2050 MTP. So unless there are any other questions or hands raised, which I'm not seeing any at the moment, I will say thank you again, everyone, for your participation today, for tuning in to our technical workshop and sharing your thoughts and feedback on the 2050 MTP. If you do have any other follow-up questions, please reach out to us at any point. And I would say thank you again and enjoy the rest of your day.